All right. Good evening, everyone. The Planning and Zoning Commission of February 6, 2012 at 6:32 p.m. is now in session.
Oh,
What?
I've got a problem here. Hold on. I'm sorry.
We have a technical problem. We'll be back in just 1 minute. I can't get in. I'll turn it off. I'll put it back on.
Go down to the
Attention.
Okay, I'm in.
Good. All right. Now we're good.
All right. May we have the roll, please? Commissioner Wilson, will you give the roll? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Connie
the Secretary.
Yoshimura,
Present.
Bruce Phelps,
Here.
Stacy Dean, Terry Parks, Dana Pruse,
Here.
Richard Wilson,
Here.
Ray Hickle,
Here.
Peter McCahey.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. I have a couple of announcements that I would like to make. First of all, in the matter of case 2012-010, at the request of the petitioner, this case has been postponed indefinitely. And we need a motion for that, please.
That would help a lot. And also confirm that whether or not that's a wetland.
Commissioner Wilson, may we have a second? Seconded by Ray Hickle. That motion is approved. Thank you. I have an announcement also for the benefit of those of you in the audience that are interested in Title 21. We have an anticipated change of the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing schedule for Title 21. Notice of anticipated change to Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing schedule on provisionally adopted Title 21. A public hearing regarding case 2011-104 before the Planning and Zoning Commission is currently scheduled for Monday, February 13th, 2012 at 6:30 p.m. in the Assembly Chambers of the LUSAC Library. However, the Planning and Zoning Commission have recently indicated to the Department their intent to postpone the hearing until Monday, March 12th, 2012. The Commission has also requested the municipality renotice case 2011-104 to open all of the provisionally adopted Title 21 for public comment and recommended changes at the Planning and Zoning Commission, in addition to the proposed amendments that have been brought forward at the request of the administration. The March public hearing would cover provisionally adopted Chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, and 13, as well as draft Chapter 14. The Planning and Zoning Commission will make a formal decision at its February 13th meeting regarding expanding the scope of case 2011-104 and changes to its hearing schedule. If the Planning and Zoning Commission does postpone the hearing date to March 12th, then the public comment deadline will be extended to March 2nd, and official public notice of the changes will be provided. Thank you. We have the minutes of Monday, January 9th, 2012. May I have a motion for approval, please? Moved by Ray Hickle and seconded by Dana Pruse. Is there any objection to those minutes? Then they are approved. We have a special order of business, disclosures. Commissioner Wilson, will you please handle the disclosures?
Yes. Do you have any thing to disclose, Pete?
Probably appropriate for me to remain on the record that, as disclosed on the January 9 meeting, that although I was not yet a commissioner when cases 2011-108 and 2010-100 were last before the commission, I was present during those proceedings.
Okay. Commissioner Phelps?
I should probably note that assuming we get to the Metropolitan Transportation Plan this evening, that I do work for the state of Alaska. Some of the projects are actually financed by the state. I don't think that would, the fact that I work for DNR just would not affect my vote on this, but I think I should probably bring it to the Commission's attention.
Thank you. Commissioner Hickle?
I have no conflicts.
Commissioner Cruz,
I have no conflict.
and Commissioner Yoshimura.
In the matter of case 2011-126, as previously disclosed, I am a property owner in Anchorage, Eagle River, and the city of Palmer, and have been previously recused from this case. And so I will not be participating, which requires us to have an interim chair for that case, since the vice chair is not present this evening. So I would entertain a motion for an interim chair. Again, I would entertain a motion for an interim chair. Commissioner Cruz.
I move that Commissioner Wilson be interim chair.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second to that? Seconded by Commissioner Hickel. Is there any objection to Commissioner Wilson as the interim chair? Seeing and hearing none, then he is the interim chair for case 2011-126. The secretary has informed me that we also have a motion, that we also need a motion in hindsight to direct me to participate. A no vote would indicate then that I would be recused as previously approved. May I have a motion?
Question.
Yes.
Isn't this a continuation?
It was postponed.
So is
Which
that
is still
still
a-
not a, that is still a
That's a
continuation?
continuation.
Yeah.
Practice has been to do the motion each time the meeting comes up. And so I was just following practice. Mr. Barrett, do you have a comment on that?
Madam Chairman, better safe than sorry. Do it again. It's if there's a conflict, get it on the record a second time, even if it is a continuation, just to let the public know.
Okay. Commissioner Wilson?
I move to direct Commissioner Yoshimura to participate.
Seconded by Ray Hickel. Would you please use your machine? A no vote would recuse me from participating. Thank you. I am recused on case 2011-126. On the consent...
And I have no conflicts.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Wilson. All right. On the consent agenda item, resolutions for approval, number 1, A, B, and C, and D, A, which is not a public hearing. This is a time extension of 36 months for Chugach Electric Association. May I have a motion for approval, please? Mr. Phelps.
Yes, I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Okay. Is there a second? Commissioner Wilson has seconded. Is there anyone who objects to that? Anyone who wants to pull any of these resolutions or case 2012-011 for further discussion or information? Seeing and hearing none, those resolutions and case 2012-11 are approved. Okay. We are now moving on to unfinished business and actions of the public hearing, case E1, 2011-108. This is a continuation of the public hearing and unfinished deliberations. It has been postponed from 1/9/2012. The public hearing is still open. Madam Secretary, could you tell me how many minutes The petitioner's representative has left. Don't know yet. Okay. We're going to move on to the public hearing, the continuation of the public hearing. Is there, just one.
What we need to do is two things: read the public hearing process for the record, and also explain that the two cases are combined.
Okay. The procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meeting is, 1, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure. Petitioners, including all her representatives, 10 minutes. We've already had some of this time, and we will clarify how much time is remaining. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., 5 minutes, individuals 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after the Planning and Zoning Commission's final decision. Any individual may request written findings from any commission decision within 7 days. This is a combination hearing of 2011-108 and 2010-100. If you have already spoken to these two cases, you are not allowed to speak again, but we will be taking new testimony. Is there anything that staff would like to speak to again or reiterate?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did just have a brief update. So case 2011-108 is an amendment to the UMED plan to add 4 new land use categories that apply only to APU and amend the land use plan map for the lands only on the APU campus. Case 2010-100 is a request to approve the Alaska Pacific University Master Plan. The amendment to the UMED plan is required for the master plan to be consistent with the UMED plan. So that's why both cases are being heard concurrently this evening. The request to change the UMED plan also clarifies the original intent of the preservation open space designation and is one of the key issues. There's a memo that the petitioner's representative, Dal HKM, provided further clarifying that, and the staff report also clarifies and provides the discussion that took place that evening and whether or not it was the intent of the plan to keep upland developable land in the open space designation. This plan, there was some confusion at the first hearing about whether this plan changes the zoning, and it does not. The lands all remain in the PLI zone, but just like we have land use policy documents in Anchorage 2020, the UMED plan also provides a land use policy guidance, and this land use policy guidance can sometimes not be completely consistent with the underlying zoning. So the underlying zoning in this is PLI, and what happens in the UMED plan is that a significant amount of land comes out of the open space preservation designation for APU property and becomes designated as developable. I was concerned that you guys did not get in the latest packet color versions of the maps. So that's what Al and I were just down there passing out to you. And you can see the top map is what they're proposing, Exhibit A, and underneath is what it had been previously. What they're proposing to keep as open space and preservation is in dark green on this map, and it does include, I believe you can confirm this with the petitioner, the Class B wetlands that they have on their property in the northwest corner. That's they're choosing to keep that designation for the Class B wetlands and along the perimeter of the property along the north and eastern boundary. The other main issue that was discussed at that meeting was trails and trail access. For case 2011-108, the department recommends approval of the amendment to the UMED plan. This will go on to the Assembly, so your recommendation is a recommendation for approval to the Assembly. And for case 2010-100, the department recommends approval of the Alaska Pacific University Master Plan subject to conditions 1 through 9 on pages 57 through 59 of the staff report. So I feel like I've just briefly summarized some key things. I'd be more than happy to give a full staff presentation on this case if you like, but I will just leave it there for now. Thank you.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions of staff? Commissioner Phelps.
I think it's really important for us to understand what the intent of the original plan was. My reading of this is that the original plan was meant to be a general guide and was not meant to necessarily take away development rights of the entities that occupy the UMED district. That's my understanding, and I guess you might say the analysis provided by the petitioner's representative as to the purpose and intent of the master plan. Would the staff concur with that evaluation done by the petitioner's representative?
Yes.
I'm trying to get to the intent of this thing.
Yes, the staff, after reviewing the minutes from the meeting, from both the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and the Assembly meeting, concurs that that was the intent of the discussion. There were some amendments that were made to the plan on the floor that weren't consistently made throughout the document, and we agree that that was the intent.
There was a recommendation made by, I believe it was the non-motorized transportation coordinator, about dealing with the Trail of Anchorage, I believe that's the name of it, in a particular way. I believe they recommend an easement. How does this particular plan deal with that issue?
This particular plan makes a very firm stance on trails on its property. They acknowledge the Chester Creek Trail that runs along the east side in an easement on their property. There's also an easement for a little part of the University Lake Trail Loop on their property. And there's one other small trail that cuts across their property coming off of Mosquito Lake. Besides that, this was a point of much discussion, and there was a very strong statement in the plan that says all other trails within campus boundary are private and are not within specific trail easements and may be modified, relocated, or closed by APU as its campus needs change over time, irregardless of their appearance on any municipal trail or district plans. That said, there is a trail designated across their property on the Trails Plan, on the Anchorage Trails Plan.
I guess the question that I have is, well, it seems then the staff is supporting a position that an easement or protection of some way of the Trail of Anchorage is not necessary or appropriate. That's my interpretation.
I believe that the staff report has provided all of the background information. It has provided what the municipality, what the administration's position is on this, and it is up to the commission to make a decision.
Yeah. There's a lot of information here. I would like to have the staff summarize that recommendation again.
The municipality concurs that the trails on APU campus are private trails. The Chester Creek Trail easement along the east property boundary provides adequate regional trail connectivity through the district. That's the department's position.
Okay. Are there any other questions of staff before we open the public hearing? I have a question, Ms. Iverson. On the recommendations for the amendment to the UMed plan on page 21, to add the following land use classifications: APU recreation open space. The first statement is Class B wetlands should be permanently protected from development through a conservation easement or similar instrument. Could you speak to staff's position on this matter, since Class B wetlands are considered developable?
I believe the way that this is worded here is it somewhat mirrors the existing language in the UMed plan regarding preservation open space, in that it refers to the future need for the municipality to have conservation easements. I believe that the petitioner has agreed to put their Class B to continue to leave their Class B wetlands in this open space type classification, but they're carrying over the language from the previous plan that speaks to the future need for the municipality to create a conservation easement for those lands if it truly does want to see those lands preserved in perpetuity.
I read some of the comments in the previous cases that have appeared, and it would appear that the previous commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, was pretty emphatic that Class B wetlands were to be allowed to be developed in the UMed district. Did I misinterpret something in my reading?
No, I don't think you are misinterpreting it. It seems to me that the petitioner has taken out their uplands from the preservation open space category. They've left in the Class B wetlands, perhaps as a point of negotiation. I'm not really sure why. That's just kind of what they've proposed. So I suppose they would have had a case if they would have said we want to take the Class B wetlands out as well. But they left them in, and we supported leaving them in.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? All right, so the public hearing is open, and are there members of the public who would like to testify at this time? Yes, I did. The Secretary has informed me that as a result of the combination of the cases, the individual testimony will be increased to 5 minutes, and those participants representing groups will be increased to 7, and the rebuttal time for the petitioner is 6 minutes on their rebuttal. Is that, does the petitioner's representative concur with that amount of time? All right, very good. I think we've taken care of all these other little administrative matters. Now, is there anyone here who would like to testify? Please come forward. Thank you. If you would clearly state your name for the record, and if it's more than one syllable, if you could please spell it, we'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. And state if you're representing a group or an individual.
Okay, my name is Amanda Holtz, Hults. I'm representing myself as a neighborhood. Ready? Okay. I'm really here to speak about the impacts that this amendment to the UMed plan and the master plan for APU will have on the neighborhood that's adjacent on the east side. I understand and I completely appreciate APU's right to develop their lands, but as an adjacent landowner, I'm just a little concerned about the possible of developments that's going to take place on the land that's going to be adjacent to our property. They mentioned, one of the representatives from APU mentioned that there's a potential for, say, a warehouse type of facility that potentially could be developed right adjacent to a neighborhood in the future. With this plan, once it's adopted, that would be possible. And this land is, I know it is zoned, but these type of activities seem more commercial-like when you're looking at like a warehouse with the noise intrusions and the light intrusions that's going to be, a 25-foot setback from a trail that's denuded of vegetation. Really, that's a lot of impact on the neighborhood. This is a well-established neighborhood, and I would appreciate if there was a little bit more of a clarification on what type of setback. Is it open space? Is it vegetation required or some type of natural buffer that we can expect between that 65-foot utility easement that's got a trail in it, it's got a utility, it's basically denuded of vegetation except like 10 feet. And so there's really not a whole lot of room there to protect us from the sounds and the devaluation. It's going to devalue our property basically when we're looking at a warehouse. I would appreciate if they could either bump those endowment, reserve, and development priority lands closer to the core, which seems to be more in line with the current UMed district plan, as well as the Anchors 2020 plan, which talks about integrating into infrastructure using existing transit systems, things like that. It seems more appropriate to have that type of development more towards the core, where you already have impacted areas where the vegetation is already missing. It seems to be a little bit more appropriate to have it kind of where the existing infrastructure is. The area closer to the neighborhood maybe seems more appropriate for, say, the student or the faculty housing, more residential-like versus commercial-like would be right up against the neighborhood that's very established. I was looking at the plans and looking at the intent of the existing plans that are in place, and talked a lot about being compatible uses with adjacent neighborhoods, things like that. I felt like this plan didn't really take into account a lot of the impacts of that one side, as the east side is the only part of the whole property that butts up against the neighborhood. And it would be greatly appreciated if they could maybe reevaluate the setback, possibly have a 50-foot from the trail easement, so we can look at some vegetation to help protect that. I have lots of things I would like to say, but I'm also a little concerned about the lack of specifics in the plan. My understanding is, you have the Area 20, Anchors 2020, then you have the UMed plan, then you have a step-down plan, which is more, I thought, more specific with the APU master plan would be more detail-oriented, where it would give me specifics on what I can expect as a neighbor in terms of buildings, the standards, the criteria that the public can see, as well as the municipality staff can utilize. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but I just see that plan as lacking a lot of the specifics, especially when it comes to that endowment lands. They really talk a lot about protecting their views for the core area, for their faculty and their staff. They speak a lot about that in the design guidelines, but I didn't really see a lot when it comes to the guidelines for that development, the endowment lands. And so that makes me a little uneasy not knowing what could take place we've already been told maybe a warehouse type of building. We don't know what else that could be, but, again, I'm worried about the sounds, heavy machinery at buildings with rock core. You can expect heavy machinery making noise. You can expect lights, things like that. So I'm just would appreciate if the plan can be modified to include a little bit more detail as well. I know that the provisionally adopted Title 21 has a section where it talks about, all right.
Could you finish up quickly?
Oh, I just say the provisionally adopted Title 21 talks about what's required of those institutional master plans, and I felt like comparing that to the current APU master plan draft or proposal, it just didn't have a lot of those specifics that might be required for future institutional type of plans.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the speaker? Commissioner Phelps.
You had mentioned about the need for additional buffer area, and I believe you said that or recommended that it be 50 feet, I guess it would be westward of the existing trail easement. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is that area vegetated to the best of your knowledge?
Right. I haven't measured the whole way, but near my homes, where I live, is you've got the utility easement, and within that you have the trail easement falls in there, and they're saying 25 feet from that. And about 10 feet within that 25 feet, 10 to 15 is currently vegetated. So I think if you would extend that to a 50-foot or more, then it's a 25, I think you would get a little bit more vegetation. Most of us know that Alaska most of the time is winter, and we don't have vegetation that has leafed out. And so right now with the 10-foot easement, the conifers have needles, but most of the other vegetation doesn't have leaves. So really it's a very clear shot visibly. So a 50-foot, I think, would give us a little bit more of a barrier, a buffer.
You had also mentioned about the need for specifics. What did you have in mind in terms of specifics, identification of land uses? Do you have anything that was more specific in mind?
Well, again, I'm not super familiar with the municipality plans, but it seems like there's not a whole lot in terms of heights and types of buildings. It almost seemed like to me that there was more specific information even in the UMed district plan that's currently in place that in terms of the guidelines. And so I thought this plan would go a step further and give even more detailed in terms of what should take place in those areas. I might be mistaken, but that it just seems to, why go to the trouble of making a detailed plan about these specific lands when it doesn't seem like there's a lot of detail for the endowment lands. Now, they did get a little bit more when it comes to the core area.
Commissioner Phelps, anything else?
No.
All right. Any other questions from the speaker? All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who wishes to testify? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Tom Bronga, spelled B-R-O-N-G-A. I'm a resident of Wesleyan Drive, probably one of my neighbors there. I also am a community council member for the university area, and I was part of the team that put together the university area community council resolution regarding the APU master plan. And I don't know if you've seen that. Is that something you're familiar with, or would you like me to read that to you?
If you could read it for the benefit of the commissioners, that would be most helpful.
Sure. University Area Community Council resolution voted on by the membership on January 4th, 2012. Whereas the University Area Community Council has discussed the Alaska Pacific University Master Plan and is supportive of the plan with the following stipulations. Number one, a setback from the subdivision to the east be 50 feet from the western line of Chester Creek as it passes behind Wesleyan Drive. Number two, that the master plan include at least 3 kilometers of continuous trail system that connects to other trails nearby, such as Chester Creek, Tour of Anchorage, University Area, and Russian Jack. Number 3, encourages the construction around the core of the university area. the Alaska Pacific University, passed on the 4th of January 2012. As I said, I'm a resident of Wesleyan Drive. I'm also an educator for Anchorage School District. I have coached cross-country running, cross-country skiing, track. I have coached elementary school at College Gate, at Wendler, and at East High School. I have also worked with 5-year-olds up to adults and spend quite a bit of time in the university area outdoors. My wife is also a graduate of APU, so we've also have a vested interest in what happens indoors at APU. I believe there can be a compromise between the residents in the area and the university in their master plan. I'd like to read a paragraph from the APU website. Dr. Bant's welcome message on their homepage of the website, the very first statement. John Dewey, one of America's foremost educators, once described the most effective education possible as a great teacher and a student sitting side by side on a log. You will find this at APU. I agree with this statement. I'm an outdoor educator. I know the value of teaching outdoors. I also am a classroom teacher, and I know the value of teaching indoors. My question to Dr. Bantz is, while the statement is true today, we have a fine university, we also have a lot of outdoor area at APU. How does this fit with the APU 20-year master plan? That color document that was introduced to you earlier, if you notice, there is quite a bit of PLI development planned in the next 20 years, including a large block surrounded by open green space. And then in purple, potential access. Now I ask you, does that look reasonable? How can you have PLI, developable area, a priority, and then have potential access to that? This is puzzling to me. The minimum amount of green on this sheet of paper also, throughout most of it, has purple, potential access. How can this be green open space, and then at the same time in this master plan, it's discussed that that green open space could also be developed? Doesn't make sense to me. I was happy to see there were 3 designated trails mentioned. There's only one on this same sheet of paper, the Chester Creek Trail, unless I'm missing something. So the Mosquito Lake Trail is not on there. I guess that's not part of APU. I'm not sure. I don't recall the 3rd trail that you mentioned, but that's also not on this plan. And my question is, why isn't there a trail map included in this plan for the 20 years of APU? The question that comes to my mind is, what's most important? You have a difficult decision here. Health, education, wealth. In a community living in Anchorage, we need development, no question. We also need to live in a healthy environment, and education is paramount. Well, without health, education and wealth aren't worth much, are they? If we don't have our health, we're not able to use our education or spend our wealth. I do believe, like I said earlier, that there can be a compromise. The University Area Community Council resolution asking for those 3 stipulations, setback being pushed back from 25 to 50 feet, minimum we feel is a reasonable expectation. Some 3 kilometers of continuous trails we put into this master plan I think is reasonable, and encouraging that they develop around the core.
Excuse me. Are you speaking on behalf of the community council or as an individual?
I'm not a community council member. I am a member, excuse me. I'm not on the board, so I would like to speak for the community council unless there's a board member present. I don't see that.
You have to have the authority to do that given to you by the board.
Okay.
So
Sure. Let's say no then.
All right. Okay. So you're speaking as an individual. You have
Sure.
3 seconds, but so if you could wind up, and then perhaps there'll be a commissioner that has questions.
Sure.
All right.
The hotel, the other PLI land that's been developed on the south side, I think that's reasonable to continue to develop the south side for PLL and APU's development.
All right. Are there any questions from Commissioner Phelps?
Let me go to your first recommendation, this establishment of a 50-foot setback from, what is the definition you have there? What's the description? Give me the wording on that.
the subdivision to the east. Oh, sorry, that's, okay, so 50 foot from the western line of the Chester Creek Trail. So the western edge of the Chester Creek Trail.
Okay. And the next question is, why 3 kilometers of continuous trail? I mean, why did you decide on 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers or whatever?
Okay. The same goes for 50 feet. I mean, it's an arbitrary number, but we felt that there's probably 6 kilometers of trail there now. We understand that APU needs to develop their PL land. They need money to run their university. We want them to stay in business. They're a good neighbor. So we felt cutting that in half into 3 kilometers would be a fair compromise.
The trail of Anchorage, what was your discussion about that, or what is your feeling about that?
The 25-kilometer tour of Anchorage, I think you're referring to, has started last year at, I believe, at the hotel, where that is now around University Lake, and going through the soccer field, and then out onto the Chester Creek Trail. So in this scenario, if development occurred and roads, and I believe that's called University Lake Drive, if that road is built and then that PLI property is developed on that east side of Wesleyan, then there would not be a possibility to have unless they put snow down on top of their roads. Mm-hmm. So my position is that you can't have a race start in that area. There may be a room for a soccer field, but right now there's about 500-meter circumference. There's quite a few. College Gate, East High, and Wendler, those 3 cross-country teams all at the same time on this field this fall. I don't think that could occur in this scenario.
I guess what I'm getting to is that you have to always set priorities, and that is private land we're talking about here.
Right.
I think they have already identified 3 trails, but did not include the tour of Anchorage. I'm trying to get a sense of priorities here. Is that particular trail particularly important, or is it just one of many trails in the area?
So the tour of Anchorage, there's 2 races, one being the 50-kilometer, which comes down from Service High and stays on that orange dotted line. I believe it'll stay on, it may change year to year. So the 50-kilometer would stay underneath that utility easement. The 25-kilometer last year went right down that yellow Phase 1 road, I believe, or right in that area, through that green open space, which we call the soccer field, and then out that little green corridor to the paved Chester Creek Trail. So I don't see how that could exist as it is today.
Thank you.
Do any of the other commissioners have any questions? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who wishes to testify? Please come forward. Please state your name for the record and whether or not you're representing yourself or a group.
I'm Sarah Baumeister, Baumeister, and I'm representing myself.
Thank you.
I live in the neighborhood where this development might occur. These are my neighbors that just spoke. And I was born and raised here in Anchorage. I left for school, actually left for 8 years, and decided to return back to Anchorage because I couldn't find any place that was like Anchorage. And one of the things that I really appreciate about this city is the trail system and the green space, and that's very important to me. And I know it's important to a lot of people in this city. 2 years ago, I decided to buy my first home, and I chose this neighborhood because of the trail system close by. And I'm very aware that it's private land, that it's, obviously owned by APU, and they need to do what they can to continue their educational establishment. And they have been wonderful neighbors, and they're a wonderful school. I myself am an educator. I'm an elementary school teacher here on the east side, so I appreciate what they do in this city as well. But I feel like, very much like what my neighbors just stated, that there could be some compromises made for the neighborhood. And not just the neighborhood, but there's a lot of people that travel along this trail that will that could potentially change quite drastically if this goes through in the way that it's stated right now. So I just wanted to speak in support of creating that buffer, that larger buffer than occurs now, and continuing the trail system as was spoken about before with the trail of tour of Anchorage Trail, and really just the importance of that system and the green space to Anchorage citizens.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Anyone else at all? All right. Will the petitioner's representative come forward?
We've got some displays just in case there's any questions from the commission.
Okay.
Go ahead, just right over here. And just so the audience knows, these are drawings that are all in the packet, so we're not showing anything new or secret. And they're effectively the UMED plan before the UMED plan, post our modifications that are requested, and then the master plan that we've been referring to tonight. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Tim Potter with Dow HKM, representing APU tonight. With me is Mary Ellen Tuttle, who has also been very involved for the last few years working on this master plan and the UMED plan updates. I guess number one and most importantly, as the staff indicated, this is not a rezone. And unfortunately, the way that our system works when they notify and the mail-outs go out to the community, they're not very detail-oriented, and our actual applications are not digitally available, electronically available. While I think they should be posted, and this is an overall problem that everybody has, there's a level of ignorance that goes on because they can't get access easily to the information. And to clarify, at the last meeting, I obviously got a little bit frustrated at the end of the meeting because, in fact, we did go to the Community Council numerous times over the last few years talking about this and other projects. As a reaching out after the Commission meeting, we did go back to the University Area Community Council with a formal meeting, invitations to the neighborhood as well as the condo association that was nearby in College Alps. It was a well-attended meeting, in fact, probably record-setting for the last few years at University Area Community Council. I did go to the next meeting after that, and it certainly was not as well attended. So it is a specific issue, and it was the people that came to that meeting, and a few people came to the next meeting. So my suggestion to the neighbors was that they should join and be participating in the community council so they are aware of what was going on. Unfortunately, that night we didn't even get to hear from the community council representatives who would have said that, in fact, we had been going to the meetings. So that's still kind of a troubling thing for us to deal with. We are not changing the zoning. It will still be PLI. We will still have the requirement that every project that comes forward will have to go through a site plan review process. Likewise, based on a legal settlement with UAA, from a land entitlement standpoint, they get to review and approve any use that comes forward on the property to start with. So they are also another party with a major master plan facility and campus that gets to review to make sure that we're working together, so to speak, and not creating problems. I want to go back in time just a little bit and talk about, since the 50-foot setback has come into play, something that the Commission may not know. We did submit some information in the clarification document that indicated that when the Chester Creek Trail connection, which was the missing link trail, was first put forward, it was put forward within the large utility easement that's there that is fairly clear of large vegetation, and figured that that would be a good place for the trail because that's where the trail was being used, both for runners, walkers, neighborhood walkers, the sled dog races, basically everything. The neighborhood responded negatively to that and said that they wanted the new trail to be buffered from the utility easement. So in fact, the utility easement stayed there, there was a buffer of trees established, and then there's the trail easement. And now what is being asked for is an additional 50 feet beyond that, when if in fact the trail would have gone where the trail had been for years, there would have been a big buffer there already. We have suggested that we would go with 25 foot from the edge of the pavement, which assures that there will be a little bit of the trail easement involved and probably at least 15 feet of buffered area adjacent to that. And then consider that every project comes back through a site plan review, and not knowing exactly what type of project it may be, from residential to something that is warehousey, that will come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, be evaluated, and the appropriate buffer can be established based on the specifics of that project and the nature of that specific location. The issue of the warehouse came out of a question that was asked to me as to whether or not there had ever been any discussions or plans for any of the property. And yes, the Oil and Gas Commission has been looking for a location to put a repository archives building that would hold all of the rock borings from all over the state property that's been done historically. And that's where research is done, and there'd be a small office facility in association with that. There is no design for it. I can't tell you whether it will be underground and have a green roof, be partially underground and have a green roof. Don't know exactly what the design will be, but it seems to me that that's what the process coming to the site plan review process is. APU has been a long-term community partner. They do have a significant amount of trails on their property. They use it themselves for their own programs. They have a world-class cross-country skiing program there. I doubt that they are going to shoot their face off despite themselves to do that, but they do want to make sure that they have the flexibility that if they need to move portions of the trails to make other things fit, that can be taken into account without having to go back through a big fight to do it. It is private land, and that's how they'd like to be treated. The other consideration is on the wetlands for the B wetlands. We did include most of the B wetlands in our open space green zone. That does not mean, however, that we wanted to preclude the city when and if they ever get the opportunity to live up to what they said the first go-around, that should be preserved in a conservation easement, and the property and or the conservation rights should be purchased. Now, the reason that we're a little bit concerned is that there will be crossings of some of those buffer areas in the future, and we want to make sure that that's accommodated. So we don't want to say that everything is boarded up and can't be touched at this time. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Phelps.
I have a bunch.
Fire away.
Okay. First of all, I appreciate the master plan and what APU has done previously in terms of trails and other accommodations. I think that should be recognized up front. So the questions I have are not meant to be difficult. I just try to get to a particular answer here. You mentioned that site plan review is going to be required for future facilities. Where does that come? I mean, where's the authority for that?
PLI.
I don't think that PLI actually requires a site plan review, does it?
Yep.
Well, we can ask that
read the
question.
last lines of the code as far as PLI goes.
Okay, I can ask staff, but what does it say offhand?
Everything that we've done out there, the hotel went through a process. The USGS building originally, the USGS building expansion, have all gone through that process.
No, I understand that. I'm just surprised that there's a requirement for that inside code, but I can confirm that with staff. There was also concern about the absence of design requirements, and I guess the question I would have is that, would you think the design requirements or design stipulations would be derived from the site plan process? And do you also think that some of the criteria that are in the UMed district would also apply in this area?
I want to be very cautious talking about design standards. We basically put some in that are rudimentary. I'll acknowledge that. APU has been real interesting over the years that they want to keep a low-profile campus. When the hotel project came forward, the original developer of that, Nana Marriott, wanted to go with a 4-story high building because it would have been much more efficient, the soils were poor, and that would have consolidated the footprint of the building into a lower-cost foundation system. APU was very concerned with that and said we need to know what it's going to look like, because if we can see the roof from the interior of the core up on the next terrace, we don't want that. We want to have everything sit down into the woods. So we actually went out there and floated helium balloons and went up 3 stories and 4 stories, took photos, photoshopped what the images would be based on the computer simulations, and then showed them what that was. And they came back and said, no, we're still set with keeping a 3-foot or a 3-story maximum on these types of buildings. So they already have kind of an ingrained review process and stipulations about what they will allow internally. As far as the site plan review process, I think that you're going to see that anybody that comes forward first has to deal with APU. Then they have to go deal with UAA because of the legal settlement. And then they have to go back through a site plan review process as a public review before it gets approved. So I think if you go look at the buildings that have been put up, both in the past and recently, I think that itself is the best evidence that attests to APU's wanting to make sure that they have good architecture on campus.
And in fact, when I was on the commission, still I'm on the commission, I actually participate in some of those reviews, so I agree. There was concern about the sufficiency of setback on the east side, and they were proposing 50 feet. Can you speak to that again, please?
Sure. We listened to the 50-foot requirement. There were suggestions of larger setbacks than that. We evaluated, based on history, what had gone on, and was it really appropriate to have a 50-foot additional buffer right now. And I'm not going to say that when the Planning Commission does a site plan review and the community sees a plan that comes forward for another project, that it won't be appropriate to have a 50-foot buffer or maybe even more. But it should be based on the specifics of what that building is. So what we've done is, rather than just say the easement's there and we can build up to the easement, we've suggested that there be a 25-foot setback from the west edge of the paved surface of the trail to a building setback line. And that would be the starting point. Nothing could ever be less than that, and it will only go up from there.
What would your reaction be to a intent statement where in the site plan review process that as it pertains to this area on the east side, that process look carefully at retaining open space to provide a buffer between the building and the adjacent neighborhood, keeping it 25 feet as a minimum, though?
I don't have a problem with that. It should be part of that process. And I would assume that all of you here and whoever's here in your place in the future would do that. And certainly we'll take that into account as well. I only want to ask, and this is not to be whiny, but I want to make sure that the neighbors also understand that if we're all talking about buffering and what's appropriate, let's make sure that everybody that lives there plants an extra tree in their backyard and provides a little bit of a buffer as well. And I'll let you all go down the trail or go down the old power line, and you can see that some people are good neighbors and some people aren't.
You'll be happy to know this is my last question. I'm looking at the first case, which is E1, and I'm looking more specifically at page 21 where it says APU recreation/open space. And if you notice under items B, C, and D, it's a fairly straightforward statement of, what the category is. For example, APU institutional core says this land use category includes all the educational support facilities associated with the university mission. Very clear statement. What's missing from this APU open space is any sort of statement like that. I mean, it would seem that this land use category called recreation open space is intended for recreation and open space within the university area. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, Mary Ellen.
Sorry, through the chair, Commissioner Phelps, are you talking about for the APU?
Tell them we are.
Yeah, what I'm talking about is, again, on page 21, item A, there's an absence of a statement at the very beginning of the sentence that says what the recreation open space is. So, for example, if you look at B, and it says APU institutional core, this land use category includes all the educational support facilities, da-ding. You see the same approach in C and D as well, too. What I want to do is put something similar to that in A.
Right.
You have an opposition to that.
No, I think that would be clearer to say that it is an area used for open space buffering and recreation.
Okay. Next question. This goes to intent. So when I'm looking at recreation/open space, and I'm looking at the eastern area, and I'm looking at the Class B wetland, I am generally assuming that those areas will, to the extent practicable, retain for their function as recreation open space. Notice I said to the extent practicable. Okay. My understanding further, though, is that there is the need for the potential for some type of utility crossing or other type of facilities in the future, but generally speaking, the intent is for that area to remain as open space or for recreation purposes, open space and recreation purposes. That would not preclude the acquisition of that area by a conservation easement, however. But I am trying to get to the issue of what is the intent here? Is it really meant to be open space and open space for recreation purposes?
It is really intended to be for open space and recreational purposes. And whether there's a trail there that goes through it or along it, if you look at where that's located, APU sits on kind of a double hill, and there's a terrace up high that has a promontory on it, and then it drops down again to another terrace. And up on the north side, in the northwest corner where you're looking at the B wetlands, that's really the edge, and it's a pretty defined line from a vegetation standpoint, and that it drops off down into the wetland. And that's what we've essentially mimicked, so that the upland is outside of that, and the B wetland. It's a combination of black spruce and other types of vegetation, and would be suitable for a trail, could be suitable for a winter skiing trail, whatever that may be.
I believe those are there now. Yeah. Okay.
So we looked at that and looked at the practicality of, we don't believe that that's going to be preserved, even though we could apply to the Corps of Engineers and try and get a permit to develop within that area. We really tried to balance the need to have a buffer around a good part of the perimeter and or a break between the educational core and the endowment properties.
It does seem that way.
Right.
Look at that second sentence there where it says buffer areas along the eastern boundary will be at least 65 feet in width from the property line. Now, is that your understanding? So, I've heard your discussion about 25 feet from the edge of trail. But is the 65 feet the same thing as what you're saying?
The 65 foot is actually the utility easement that's there now.
Oh.
And part of the trail easement that the city has, that they acquired, overlaps on that. And then we're talking about where the trail actually physically got placed. The paved surface of the Chester Creek Trail connection would be another 25 feet from the western edge of that trail.
So would a better description be 25 feet from the western edge of the trail?
Right.
Was that correct?
And I think Mary Ellen has a cross-section here that shows what that looks like. But yeah, it would be 25 feet from the western edge of the actual paved surface of the trail. So you've got a slight clearing area with a shoulder of a couple feet of gravel, and then in most cases it's vegetated, and then that's what we would be talking about. And then subject to site plan review for each project that comes forward, then it could be increased beyond that from a buffer, but that would be a minimum that would be established.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you. Mr. Potter, you just touched on it with Commissioner Phelps' question, and I'm trying to get a handle on, from the property line on the eastern side to with the existing utility easement and the buffer and the trail, what is the footage? I mean, I'm confused.
About 108 feet.
How much?
About 108 feet.
And that's with your 25-foot compromise solution?
Right.
So if we were to make that the 50-foot, it would add another 25 feet to this
Correct.
one way. Is that correct?
Correct.
And am I clear that that's contiguous along the complete eastern property line, that 108 feet? Or does it move in and out?
Commissioner Prudes, as Tim mentioned earlier, there's a 65-foot easement at the eastern property line, and then then the trail is within that, and then we're going 25 feet out from the trail. So it would be a total of 80 feet from the property line to the building setback line that we've talked about.
Apologize for my misstatement.
Okay. Well, I was confused. So I was trying to figure out just as it is right now. And that includes the 25 feet. The 80 feet includes the 25 feet. Okay. So it's 65 and 25. All right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? So, Commissioner Phelps again.
I'm trying to write language right now, so if you have a question, why don't you go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question about the Class B wetlands. For general purposes, can you give us a definition of Class B wetlands?
For Class B wetland, it can be developed subject to getting a 404 permit, and in some cases a clean water 401. And in the old days, when the Wetlands Management Plan was first developed, and we had developable and then your B wetland and A wetland, it was always considered that you might be able to develop about 50% of a Class B wetland. Now, again, it really depends on where it is, what the habitat value is, and all of the functions that it has. But that was kind of a guideline. But it's all subject to getting a Corps of Engineers permit.
And you are willing to give up the possibility of any development for your Class B wetlands?
We are, for what we mapped, and it's pretty coincidental where the B wetland line is and where our open space recreation area is. What we have done is not that we're willing to give it up. We are willing to identify it in our master plan as recreation and open space because we believe that to be an appropriate use for it. And we also suggest that we will have corridors for access and utilities that will cross that, and we'll have to go for a permit to do that. But we believe that the amount of open space, the type of land, and where its location is relative to the campus development, that the B wetland is part of our open space recreation area.
So do you have an issue with the statement Class B wetlands should be permanently protected from development through a conservation easement or similar instruments, or do you have other language that might be more desirable?
Well, my preference would be to not have any reference to the Class B wetland and just say that we've designated this specific area for, as designated on the map, as recreation open space. And the fact that part of it's Class B wetland and part of it isn't, that's just the way it is.
Okay.
So.
Mr. Phelps, if you'll hold your thought for a minute. So Commissioner Wilson?
I wanted to talk about road access. Has that been involved at all in your planning? And if so, what kinds of future road access? You mentioned access. Did that include roads?
We wanted to make sure, because sometime in the next 20 to 30 years, maybe not, the northern access or southern extension or whatever you want to call it of Elmore or Bragaw, whatever you want to call it, could happen. And we wanted to make sure that we had that identified so that it was taken into consideration. We don't know if it will happen. We don't know if it does happen, when it'll happen. But we had a designation to make sure that we never got bit by not having an expression of a access crossing across that open space recreation area. And I'll tell you why we're sensitive to that. When Karr-Gottstein Properties did Southport, they did a master plan community, and they did a bubble diagram. And to graphically portray Area C from Area D, they had a little gap between the dark lines that had colors in it. And when they went forward to do platting and development, the municipality had an issue with that and basically said that that was clearly in the master plan not to be a developed area. So it was, again, additional open space because it wasn't designated anything. In reality, it was a graphic portrayal so everybody could look at the map and see the difference between this color and that color. So we have dashed lines in purple going across that open space recreation area, and that's just an indication that someday in the future there may be a connection, transportation access connection of some kind. May only be a trail, but it could be a road.
And could you point that out on the proposal? And those are intended to graphically suggest what might happen, where those access...
That is graphically portrayed to show that if there's going to be access to those outline areas from whatever access points you want to talk about, that's where they would go, basically in this area. So.
Yeah, I think it's prudent to be looking ahead. That area has been discussed as a transportation issue for many, many years. And so it's good that you are thinking ahead and laying the framework for a rational land use pattern should that ever occur.
Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Phelps.
Okay, here is draft language, which I'll try and read slowly. That would replace this APU recreation/open space definition. Okay, here it goes. This land use category includes land intended for open space and recreation purposes. The intent for this land is to retain this area in its natural state, recognizing that utilities, road corridors, and other improvements may affect these areas as necessary for university expansion. A buffer area of 25 feet measured from the western edge of the current trail on the east side of the planned area shall be provided. This area may be increased as a result of site plan review in the future. And then finally, the last sentence would be, site plan reviews in the future shall utilize this definition as part of the review process.
We have no problem with that language.
Question is, can I say it again?
All right. Are there any other questions from the petitioner's representative? Okay, seeing and hearing none, the public hearing is now closed and the matter rests with the commission. I would ask for a motion to approve. Commissioner Phelps.
A question, then a procedure. I guess we do E1 first and then followed by E2? We wouldn't do them together, we do them sequentially, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I move for the approval of case 2011-108, an amendment to the UMed University's Medical District Framework Master Plan. Oh, 21? Okay, thanks. Subject to the conditions of staff, but with the following change on the first item, which is on page 21, 1A, APU recreation/open space. This land use category includes land intended for open space and recreation purposes. The intent for this land is to retain this area in its natural state, recognizing that utilities, road corridors, and other improvements necessary to university expansion may be necessary within these areas. Period. A buffer area of 25 feet measured from the western edge of the current trail on the eastern boundary of the site shall be maintained or provided. Site plan review in the future shall utilize the definition that should utilize this definition as part of the review. Okay.
Commissioner Pruz.
Just clarification, that's replacing 1A in its entirety?
In its entirety.
Thank you.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
And I have no problem with that as a seconder.
All right.
So I have, go ahead.
Are there any other comments? Do you want to speak to your motion?
Yes. I think that both the university and the staff have done very good work here. I think that the clarification of the previous commission's action in terms of the original plan has been very useful. It's clarified that the management plan for this area is intended to be a guide, is not supposed to be restrictive, and is supposed to provide a general sense of the development of the area. I believe that what is proposed this evening generally meets that intent. I believe that the modification that we have proposed to the definition of recreation open space is a better description of what is intended in the master plan, and I would recommend that that language be utilized. All other aspects of the master plan as identified here in this particular action seem to be appropriate and are consistent with the UMed plan as amended and with the area's comprehensive plan.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a comment or speak to the motion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, that motion is approved. Let's move on to case 2010-100, the Alaska Pacific University Master Plan Review, PLI Public Lands and Institutional District. May I have a motion for approval?
Can somebody help me to identify where the staff recommendations are? 57, okay. Okay. In the case of Case 2010-100, Master Plan Approval for the APU campus, I recommend approval of that master plan subject to the conditions identified on the staff packet on pages 57 through 59.
Is that a motion? You need to push your button.
Oh, sorry.
And is there a second? Seconded by Dana Pruz. Would you like to speak to your motion, Commissioner Phelps?
Most of the ideas that are the reasons for this action I really have described previously, but again, I think that the master plan is a proper reflection of the original intent of the master plan for the area, which is to provide overall guidance to the development of the area, and for the master development plan to be not restrictive upon the development, but rather to guide that development. I think that with these changes, as well as the changes that we have described in the previous action, that we will have an adequate basis for the development and management of this area in the future, and for this reason, I would support the motion.
All right, thank you. Are there any other comments from the commissioners? This motion has been seconded by Commissioner Pruz. Seeing and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. We will now take a 7-minute break and then come back and address case 2011-126 with Commissioner Wilson as the interim chair. Thank you.
I'd like to reconvene our Planning Commission meeting. Item case number 2011-126, Municipality of Anchorage on the AMATS long-range transportation plan. Metropolitan Transportation Plan, sorry. Okay, do I have a motion? Commissioner Pruz.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion in case number 2011-128-2035 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, otherwise known as the NTP, to postpone action on this until February, our commission meeting till February 13th. And speaking to that motion, if that's all right.
Do I have a second? Oops, okay. All right, seconded by Commissioner Phelps. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I'll speak just briefly to it. We have a situation where one of the commissioners has not heard the audio tapes for the previous open or the public testimony, and we would not have he would not be allowed to participate. We would not have a quorum with a short board, and so this would afford the opportunity for the commissioner to hear the audio tapes and participate next week.
And one other point, by way of explanation to the public, at that time we intend to consider whether to reopen the public hearing and start the process of public hearing over again or not at a future date. Any other comments? Anybody opposed? Okay. All right. Motion is passed. And I'll go get...
All right, we're moving on to case number G1, case 2012-012. The petitioner is the Anchorage Fueling and Service Company. It is a request for a zoning conditional use for a hazardous use. May we hear the staff presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This case is an amendment to a previously approved conditional use. It is for expansion of a fuel tank farm located on lease lot 23 at the International Airport. The site is generally located west of Point Warrenzoff Drive and south of West End Road, and the site does contain nearly 21 acres. The property is zoned T for transition. Currently, there are 5 existing jet fuel storage tanks that were granted a conditional use in 1991 and an amendment to the conditional use in 1993. This requested amendment would include the construction of 4 new tanks, they each with a capacity of 100,000 barrels, or about 4.4 million gallons of jet fuel. Now, the transition zone allows just about every land use. However, there are some land uses that are deemed somewhat more hazardous or possibly injurious uses, and the Planning and Zoning Commission may grant approval of such a land use when it finds that the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience will be adequately protected by the location, topography, buffer landscaping, or a screening structure. The requested amendment to the conditional use permit does indeed conform to the goals of Anchorage 2020, as well as the West Anchorage District Plan, which is a draft plan, both plans recognize the important role the airport plays in the Anchorage economy in terms of employment and revenues. The need for additional fuel storage tanks is to accommodate increased growth at the airport for the capacity that it now serves in terms of flights and especially cargo landings and takeoffs. There are no specific standards for a bulk fuel storage or hazardous land use within Title 21. However, in this instance, this site is within the airport is over 9,000 feet from residential development, and it is screened by natural vegetation. The site is not in close proximity to any recreational facilities either. The possibility of incompatible land uses in the area are separated by the existing natural vegetation and the distance from residential and recreational uses. There is no public pedestrian access or vehicular traffic that is allowed on the site. It is a secured site. It is entirely fenced, and it has controlled access. The petition site is served by public utilities and by Anchorage Fire Services. The application states that the Anchorage Fire Department has played an integral role in the review of the fire water and fire foam systems, and that Station 5 personnel have developed a plan for battling a fire should that ever occur. The addition of 4 fuel storage tanks really will have a negligible impact on noise levels beyond that which already exists at the due to the operation of the airport. The construction of the fuel tanks has incorporated safeguards to prevent fuel from entering the drainage system. The expansion of the fuel storage facility is necessary to meet the growing needs of the airport. At one time, the fuel storage was at several locations within the airport and off-site, but the proposed expansion is immediately adjacent to the existing storage facility. The facilities were combined into this one location back in the early 90s. The department does recommend approval subject to 5 conditions that are found on pages 7 and 8 of the packet. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Pruz has a question.
Just a couple quick questions. I assume these are single wall tanks?
technical questions like that, I defer to the petitioner's representative who have better understanding of the construction.
Is there any requirement for a fuel leak monitoring system?
I believe that's incorporated in the construction plans and the safeguards.
Could you point that out in the application?
There was a additional information that was submitted last Friday, and the project description, the tanks on this, in part one, it states that each tank is to be 134 feet in diameter and 40 feet tall, constructed of plate steel welded together at the seams. The foundations for the tanks are to be a concrete ring wall around the perimeter and compacted gravel under the steel tank floor. Tank bottoms are to be protected from corrosion by sacrificial anode cathodic protection system. The tanks are to be located inside of a secondary containment area that is constructed of earthen berm lined with an impervious geotextile liner. This is in addition to the geotextile membrane liner underneath each tank. The tanks are to be filled with from the inbound pipelines from Tesoro Refinery or from the AFSC Port of Anchorage facility.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the commission to staff? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we are now open for the public hearing. The petitioner has 10 minutes, and would you please come forward, please? State your name and how much time you would like to retain for rebuttal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Dave Corpy. I'm with Great Northern Engineering. I'm a mechanical project engineer as well as a API certified tank inspector. Margaret kind of stole some of my thunder there, but I'll try to keep it brief. She covered a lot of the issues, and then I'll leave as the majority of the time open for any questions that the Commission has. This project, as Margaret alluded to, is the scope of the project is to install 4 new 100,000-barrel jet fuel storage tanks to augment the existing storage capacity. The scope of the project would include, from the ground up, the civil portion of the work is a containment, an earthen containment system with a geotextile membrane liner that underlies the whole site, and then in that subgrade elevation or level, there is a drainage system that drains all of that containment area to a controlled collection point where it can be monitored on discharge. There's a secondary liner that is installed within the foundation of each tank and underneath the foundation of each tank, and that kind of gets into the question you had about leak detection. The foundation of these tanks is similar to a home foundation in that it has a footer and a stem wall. It's just in a circular orientation. Entirely within that circular foundation is a geotextile membrane that has a monitor tube and is routed to an inspection point outside of the foundation from the surface. So the leak detection method for these tanks is a manually detectable and accessible point outside of the tank foundation. These tanks are butt-welded steel, single-walled tanks built to the standard API 650, which is an industry standard for large above-ground storage tanks. The facility consists of all the jet fuel piping necessary to support the process, filling the tanks, draining the tanks, maintenance access for the tanks. The structural infrastructure for the project provides walkways and catwalks throughout the facility for safe access for maintenance. The system is the current facility contains the fire suppression system, which is a an AFFF system, aqueous film forming foam, which is consistent with this type of an installation per the National Fire Protection Association Code 11. And that system is expanded to cover these 4 new tanks. There's a perimeter foam line that surrounds the entire facility, as well as an individual line to each of 3 foam chambers on each of the 4 tanks. Kind of jumping over to the reasons for the expansion, again, as Margaret had alluded to, the economic benefit of the project in terms of increased traffic that's expected at the airport, and the fueling capacity in terms of storage that it's going to take to handle that, specifically cargo. One of the sayings is, or the buzzwords is, for every pound of fuel that an aircraft has to carry, it's 1 less pound of cargo it can carry, and so you have more aircraft stopping in Anchorage to refuel. There's also a lot of the decision is driven by economics based on the diverse sources of fuel, and being able to diversify the sources of fuel, which is an economic consideration for the airlines themselves. Another reason is fuel quality. The industry has, the Airline Transportation Authority has fuel quality standards that the airlines hold themselves to, and one of those is residence time, that fuel needs to be in a storage tank for settling. With increased planned traffic and fuel usage, additional storage is required for those purposes. And then lastly, emergency preparedness. On a peak level, the airport is currently using approximately 3 million gallons a day at its peak level in the summer. With the current situation, you've got 5 tanks, and at that peak rate, you would have about 7 days of jet fuel capacity in storage if there were to be a disaster that interrupted the fuel supply to the airport. I guess with that, I guess I'll conclude, and if there's any other questions, I'd be more than willing to.
Commissioner Wilson has a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for your presentation. I'm glad to see this happening, and it's kind of a pleasant surprise having watched this closely over the years. Starting off with 3 tanks in 1996, and adding 2 in 2007, and then just 5 years later, adding 4 more. So we have, my understanding is the airport folks told me that we're about at 2007, 2008 peak traffic levels now. So we're not really very much further, but it's looking ahead, and that's good to see as a planner here. I was wondering about the sources. Diversifying the sources is very important, and you have to have the storage to do that. They ran into real problems in the past because you don't buy a few gallons, you buy a tanker load at a time. I guess my question is on the land use here. Does that preclude any of the infrastructure improvements happening that have been up in the approved master plan?
Just so I'm clear on your question, you're referring to the land use.
The airport master plan calls for some improvements on the west side of this facility, and my understanding is you haven't increased the size of the footprint of this property, correct?
That's correct, and we were in conjunction with AFSC, the owner of the facility. We're working in concert with the airport, or given parameters by the airport folks on the limits of this expansion to the west. to allow for the future plans that they have out there.
Okay. And one last question. Is there any room for any more?
Probably not. Not to the west for sure, unless something drastically changes in the master plan, the way I understand it. But no, this is some information that I may not be privy to, but I don't think that there's any more room for expansion there.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Pruz?
Just a couple of quick questions. I assume these are single-wall tanks?
They are, yes.
And how about the piping between the tanks?
The piping between the tanks and the facility is all single-wall piping above ground, but welded, except where flange connections are required as a standard for industry standard for jet fuel piping in facilities.
So you mentioned a manually monitoring system for leak detection, basically a standpipe within the foundation of the tank. Did I understand that correct?
Yes, the liner. There's a liner that's affixed to the inside of the structural ring wall foundation of the tank, and it is sloped to the center so that anything that were to leak through a tank bottom would be collected above the membrane and would work into the center. And then there's basically, for lack of a better explanation, there's a well screen in there with a line that runs horizontally from there out to the edge of the foundation.
So would outside moisture be also collected in this?
It would not. Presumably, the tank is setting on the foundation, and it has a water seal around the tank floor to foundation. That's historically not been a concern, and the operator does have a maintenance program in place. So if they do detect water in there, or they find enough water in there to be a concern, they have the means to remove it. Although, and I'm not sure if you're thinking in terms of frost heaving underneath the tank or anything like that, but generally the volumes of fuel that is in this tank or in these tanks is so high that that's really not the.
Well, I'm thinking of water coming in from the outside somehow, some way. And I guess I'm curious, with today's technology, why there's not some sort of electronic hydrocarbon monitoring deal with that deal where because hydrocarbons obviously gives off a different deal than water, moisture, where
Right.
we're relying on manual sight all the time could be forgotten or missed or whatever. Whereas electronic monitoring, which is kind of the way things are going these days, is an additional safeguard. Why that wasn't considered?
I wouldn't say it was a consideration. In this case, you basically have an impervious volume under the tank of structural fill. If you were to have leakage past the floor, it would be detectable, and not so much visually. It's more of a monitoring thing with a device. But there's really no place for the fuel to go, I guess, is what is long and short of it. It can't get into the soil outside of the foundation.
I understand that, but it still leaks, and you still have contaminated soil within the system, or you have something's contaminated, whether it's a membrane or whatnot. And I'm just curious about unless I'm misunderstanding how you describe, the monitoring system is manual, that there is no alarm that goes into any one place that someone on a 24/7 would, a leak detection system, which is typically what they do with underground tanks.
Right.
And it's not very expensive. I'm just curious about this because this is really where you're monitoring for your fuel spill is under the tank, which is underground in my view, and I'm just wondering, is it cost prohibitive? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to say that it would be cost prohibitive. I think that it's a standard that is kind of been set in API 650 for under tank leak detection. And some of those technologies, I'm just speaking from, and I know you have a lot of experience with them as well. We've had issues in the past with interstitial space on tanks with electronic leak detection where we've had false trips and stuff like that. And so that's a consideration also, because if you don't have a way to verify that you have or you do not have a leak, it becomes a little more problematic. So I guess getting off on a tangent, but it was the industry standard for API 650, and that's the plan that all of the existing 5 tanks are constructed that way and have gone through the ADEC review on that basis. And so this facility was intended to basically match that existing construction type.
Okay. Well, technology's changed a little bit since the last ones. That's a comment. I think it's a great project. I think it's a well-deserved project, and I've been affected by shortage of fuel out there in past endeavors because of either refinery issues or fires or whatnot. Local refineries going down to no capacity to bring in, large capacity barges for the fuel. But I guess your comment about false alarms would just, in my mind, would be reset, but it would cause someone physically to go out and check and check that off the box. And they're not very expensive. I'm just kind of surprised that under today's world and technology that there is not an electronic monitoring apparatus out there. It's all manually. So that's what I'll say.
If I could, sir, I just wanted to say that a lot of the underground tanks are meant to be a little more maintenance-free. These tanks, the maintenance personnel, the operations personnel are out there on a daily basis doing the gauging and all the checks, and so they water draw the tanks every day. So this is another item on the list that keeps them close to the tanks. So
just out of curiosity, could you tell me what the volume, what percentage over what the tank holds that you have for storage in case of a spill?
I'm sorry, what percentage of volume the tank holds?
In other words, if it's what are these things? They're 100,000 barrel tanks. So what is your volume storage for spillage?
Oh, the spill containment overall. Yeah. It's 110% of the largest capacity tank in this case, which is 100,000 barrels or 4.2 million. So it's on the order of close to 6 million gallons.
So it's one tank, 110%, or all the tanks?
Of one tank, of the largest tank. Yep, that's the EPA regulation.
Thank you.
And I should have mentioned earlier that these two, the new expansion of the tank farm and the existing tank farm, are in separate containment dikes. They didn't have to be by regulation, but that's the way it's constructed.
Are there any other questions of the petitioner? Okay, thank you very much. You have 4 minutes and 50 seconds left for rebuttal. Thank you.
Nope.
Well, after we have the public testimony, if there's anyone that wants to testify.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right. We are now opening the hearing to public testimony. Groups have 5 minutes, individuals have 3 minutes. Is there anyone here who wishes to testify? If so, please come forward and state your name and whether you're an individual or representing a group. Hello.
Hello. My name's Kathy Gleason, Kathy with a C, Gleason, and I'm president of Turnagain Community Council. The petitioner came to our meeting last Thursday, February 2nd, to present this project and provide information to the council, since it is actually located within Turnagain. I think the notice said it was in Spenard, but it is in Turnagain. We ended up having a good discussion, lots of questions. Unfortunately, I didn't think one that I just thought of sitting over there. So perhaps you could ask the petitioner this when he comes up for his rebuttal. If there's a 9.2 earthquake, what would happen? I know that area is probably in a moderately zoned earthquake area, zone moderate, but still, 9.2 would be quite a wallop to that area, and didn't really think about that horrible worst-case scenario in terms of spill and containment and what would happen to the liners, the foundation, etc. Regardless of that last-minute question and thought, the council members didn't express any opposition. There was a motion to approve the plan. It failed. Most people didn't even vote. And I think it was because one of our board members brought up that this very informational document was passed out last Thursday, but none of us had a chance to really review it and look at it ahead of time or before we could vote. So based on the fact that we weren't completely informed and had read everything that had been provided to us before we needed to vote on that motion, most people just didn't bother to vote. So like I said, as far as verbally, nobody came out and opposed it. We recognize that it's probably the best location within the airport boundaries that a fuel tank farm should be located. It is the closest residential and recreational is the Clitheroe Center and the Coastal Trail. They're not near, but they are the nearest. And so impacts to those two facilities certainly should be considered in your deliberations. But and the airport has pretty well cleared all of the vegetation on its property west of this facility and this expansion. They left a nice buffer of trees to the north along West End Road, which I hope they do in perpetuity. But to the west, it's been pretty well cleared. So the remaining vegetation is on municipal heritage land bank land. So any future deliberations you have about that land, keep that in mind. If they're referring to natural vegetation as providing the buffer, then what's left on municipal land definitely needs to be retained, or else this buffer wouldn't exist. Other than that, I think I'm done unless you have any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Seeing and hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? The petitioner has time left for rebuttal. And perhaps you could answer the question about the earthquake.
Yes, I'll do my best. Specifically a 9.2 earthquake, I'm not prepared to answer, but I will say that as far as the tanks themselves are concerned, API 650, which is the tank construction standard, has what's called Appendix E. And Appendix E governs the earthquake, the seismic design conditions for hydrocarbon fuel storage tanks. It's the loading and the seismic accelerations and the different intricacies of how that calculation is performed is based on the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, Standard 07. And I can also say that API 650 tanks have a history that's been pretty demonstrated of surviving earthquakes with in pretty good shape without spilling, without rupturing, and that's basically due to the safety factor in the tank design standard, as well as the ductility of the materials that are involved. One of the segments of the code has to do with brittle fracture in materials, and based on the temperature in the climate that the tank is to be erected, it limits you to the more ductile materials, and so it really is taken into account. Also, as far as piping is concerned, the piping is all designed to ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers, piping code B31.3, which is process piping for, well, in this case, hydrocarbon piping. And the seismic, the load cases are all developed and are specified as per ASME B31.3. So there's seismic loading, temperature expansion, pressure in the pipelines. All of those things and combinations thereof are code requirements that have been developed by the code committees over 50 or 60 years. So as far as what would happen specifically, I don't have the answer to that off the top of my head. Surely there would be some damage, but we're confident that that the tanks have a very good chance of surviving without having a major rupture.
Do you have any other? You still have 2 minutes and 30 seconds left.
I have nothing more to add unless someone has any other questions.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
The public hearing is now closed. The matter now rests with the commission. I'd ask for a motion to approve. Mr. Pruse.
In the matter 2012-012 with the Anchorage Fueling Service Company, a amendment to the existing conditional use permit for the expansion of the fuel tank farm at Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport. I so move.
Okay, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Wilson. Would you like to speak to your motion and provide some findings? I don't think he does. He would have said so. Oh, with the following conditions?
Yes, with the
Recommendations?
following recommendations by staff on page 7 and 8 of our packet.
Okay. Would you like to speak to your motion and provide some findings?
Well, findings as furthers the goals and policies of the comprehensive district plan and conforms to the comprehensive development plan of the matter required by Chapter 21.05. It also states that it says that the Anchorage 2020 recognizes a symbiotic relationship between the airport and surrounding communities, and that activities from one can impact the other. I believe that just modifying an existing conditional use by expansion of the tank farm in an existing area that already has the storage, there's a public need, and I believe that this application satisfies that.
Commissioner Wilson, would you also like to speak to the second?
Just with the permission of the maker of the motion, just to add a couple of points, that it's the sponsor of the project has detailed the standards by which under which it's being constructed, both the tanking and the piping under national standards that have been developed by the industry and by the societies of engineers over the years, and with great attention to public safety and to the ability to handle major catastrophes. Those two are highly important for major tank farms and are especially important since 64 quake did result in some fuel spills in the older farm, which was not built under the same standards.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to the motion and provide findings? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, case 2012-012 is approved. All right, we're now moving on to case 2012-014. The petitioner is David Michael. The request is rezoning to R6 Suburban Residential District. May we have the staff presentation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you mentioned, this is a petition to rezone Lot 8A, Block 7, and Tract A1 of Mountain Air Estates from R9 Rural Residential District to R6 Suburban Residential District Large Lot. The property is located south of Rabbit Creek Road, west of Mountain Air Drive, and east of Snowflake Drive. The site contains 11.86 acres and is heavily forested, with minimal clearing having been undertaken for the single-family residential use that exists on Lot 8A. Property to the north and west is zoned R6 and developed with single-family residential subdivisions. Bear Valley Elementary School adjoins the east property boundary and zone PLI. There is some undeveloped R9 property to the southeast of the petition site, and property to the south is undeveloped and was rezoned to R6 with special limitations. And those special limitations placed on that rezone are outlined on pages 7 and 8 of the packet. The petition to rezone this property does conform to the comprehensive plan. It conforms specifically to policies number 5 and 7 and 13 and 14. Basically, that say that the rezone should be compatible in scale with adjacent uses and consistent with the goals and policies of Anchorage 2020. That new rural subdivision should be designed to maintain the rural character of the area, and conservation of residential lands is a high priority. In reviewing the statements of intent for both the R9 and R6 zoning districts, they're very similar in that they propose their intent is to maintain a rural character and to preserve the natural environment to the greatest extent possible. The intent statements are very similar for both of these zoning districts. The petition also conforms to the Hillside District Plan that recommends a density of less than 1 to 1 dwelling unit per acre, and the proposed density falls within that range. There will be no change to land use patterns, which the rezoning is essentially to a residential large lot district than that which already exists in the surrounding area. The petition site is located and is served by the Anchorage Police and Fire Service areas and Parks and Recreation. However, it is not located with the Anchorage Roads and Drainage Service area, nor is it located in a limited road service area. So any local roads are maintained by private property owners. Rabbit Creek Road is a state-owned right-of-way, and it is maintained by the state for snow plowing operations and road maintenance. The property is not served by a storm drain system. Any drainage improvements that would be required by private development for development of this property in the future will also have to be privately maintained. The property is not served by water or sanitary sewer. On-site utilities will be required. As part of the submittals with the application, soils investigations were conducted, and the results of those investigations determined that the property could support on-site septic systems and could provide the required 100-foot separation distance between the septic systems, existing wells, and potential well sites. The property is not served by public transportation, but it is served by telephone, electric, gas, and cable. As mentioned, the proposed rezoning will remove 11.86 acres from the R9 zoning district. Much of the surrounding property is already zoned R6, and both zoning districts are intended for large lot residential uses. So the future development of the property, if this rezone petition is approved, will not change the land use patterns that will be residential in nature. Therefore, the department does recommend approval of the petition to rezone with two special limitations, taking into account that some of the special limitations that were placed on the property to the south. One of the special limitations is to limit the building height to 35 feet. Accessory garages and carports not part of the principal structure shall not exceed 30 feet, and all other accessory structures shall not exceed 25 feet. That is to protect view sheds, and those height limitations are incorporated from the R9 district regulations. In discussion with the petitioner's representative, there was also a special limitation to limit maximum lot coverage from 30% to 15%. That would give an adequate building site, but would retain more of the property in an undisturbed condition. The intent of those special limitations are basically to soften the impact of 4 additional units that could be obtained if the rezoning petition is approved than that which could be obtained in the current R9 zoning district. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Commissioner Phelps.
A couple questions. I noticed that the plat or example plats were included, but I guess the point that I would want to get clarification on, we're not dealing with the plat this evening. All we're dealing with is the land use and the appropriateness of the rezoning to R6.
Madam Chair, Mr. Phelps, that is correct. They're just options. One is a 9-lot. Option 2 is the 9-lot potential subdivision. Option 3 is an 8-lot potential subdivision. The difference between the two is option 3 takes into account the right-of-way take that will be necessary to complete construction of Mountain Air Drive, still providing the utilities on site. So that results in 8 lots.
I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that we're really not dealing with the platting issues this evening, the number of lots involved. What we're dealing with, for clarity purposes, is just the reasonability of rezoning to R6.
That's correct, Madam Chair, Mr. Phelps.
Okay. The other question I had to do with Mountain Air Drive. Is that an issue here at all? Is there a street project involved here?
Well, there is a project to construct Mountain Air Drive, and there was discussions about the routes of the two particular routes, and the Public Works Department has decided to go with recommended alternative A.
I guess my point here is similar to the first one, is that we're not really talking about the road this evening, the design of the road. We're just dealing with the land use issues.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Well, I have a question. Do any of the other R6 zoned properties that are in the immediate area have these two special limitations on them?
Madam Chair, the R6 property to the south has numbers of special limitations with AO 9178. The density, they limited density. They required a 75-foot stream protection easement. They limited the number of lots that should be developed adjacent to Rabbit Creek Road. The special limitations required drainage, oil and grease separator, and water retention. Required a homeowners association. Limited street lights if they are installed, although they're not required in a rural zoning district. Limited the maximum height of the principal structures and prohibited transmission towers.
Specifically, was there a building height limitation, and was there a maximum lot coverage limitation to 15% versus the standard 30% by code?
Yes, there was the maximum height of principal structures shall not exceed 35 feet.
And the same for accessory garages and carports, shall not exceed 30 feet?
Shall not exceed 25 feet.
Okay, and what about the maximum lot coverage by all buildings is limited to 15%?
No, there wasn't a limitation on the lot coverage, but there was a limitation on the number of units and the density.
Right, consistent with the R6 zone and the adjacent property.
I did not calculate how many lots they could get in that unsubdivided piece of property.
Okay.
But they did limit the density.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? All right then. Let's have the petitioner presentation. Mr. Sawhill, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Jim Sawhill. I'm with Lounsbury & Associates, and I'm here tonight representing David and Judy Michaels for the rezone application tonight. The existing situation, Margaret laid out the case rather well. I don't think I have a lot to go over. I would like to start off with first is we have no objections to the special limitations that staff has recommended, and we would request your support tonight. This is an extension of an existing zoning boundary. The area directly to the west and the south of us is R6, so we're extending the zoning boundary to include this additional approximately 12 acres of land. And those areas are shown on pages 2 and 3 of your packet. Shows the extension of the zoning and the zoning on the east side of us. We did include as informational items 2 layouts of the potential platting, because typically it's my experience that the board likes to know what they're approving and what the results will be. So we provided that as informational items. But we did not submit the plats tonight to come along with the plat. We intend to submit that to the platting board for their approval in a separate action. So that was our intent, to follow the normal process of land use and then platting. We do recognize that the Mountain Air project is coming alongside the property. The Michaels support the Mountain Air project, although they disagree with the city over which option to prefer. They prefer B to A. But what we did ask the city is what right-of-way is required for their preferred alternative, and they provided us that right-of-way. What they would like is 20 feet of right-of-way along the length of Mountain Air Drive adjoining this property, and then some additional right-of-way at the intersection to be able to get the preferred intersection design in. So we took that into account in laying that out. We're going to lose 1 lot, and the Michaels are perfectly happy to negotiate the purchase of that right-of-way and go forward with their plat. But we don't want to do anything in our platting process that's going to, cause a problem for that. And once the land use is done, we will wait till the right-of-way gets taken care of and then push forward with our platting action. So again, the net effect is under the current zoning with the R9, with the property we have, we could get 5 lots. With the additional rezone, that pushes our lot yield up to 9 lots, basically 4 new lots, but with the right-of-way acquisition, it pushes us back down to 8. So we're going from 5 lots to 8 lots is the net effect. We have discussed with staff what potential road improvements there might be. They would like us to widen Snowflake Drive through our platting action. It's currently a substandard road. They would like us to widen it on one side so it meets current standards, so we understand that and we'll go forward with it. Of course, Mountain Air Drive will be constructed by the city, which is a benefit to my client, and they look forward to the day that gets done, and hopefully in the manner that they would like to see it done. We did submit perk tests for all the lots as proposed. We didn't want to bring forward a proposal for increased density what the soils and the land could not support. So we've done that work, and we feel pretty good about it before bringing that forward. We do believe that it conforms to the 2020 plan and the Hillside plan as staff has outlined, and we would request your support. And again, we don't object to any of the special limitations. How'd I do on time?
We have 6 minutes and 38 seconds for rebuttal.
Great, thank you.
Are there any questions? Commissioner Phelps?
First question is, why?
Why would we like this rezone?
Yeah.
Of course, we would like to develop our land to the highest and best use. And residential land is at a premium in Anchorage, and we would like to develop it to gain the maximum benefit to the community for increased units and quite frankly, the maximum benefit to my clients. The R9 land was generally designated in areas where the soils were considered to be marginal, and it wasn't believed that it would support the higher density. But we have done the work to demonstrate that it can support that density. So in this particular case, we have site-specific information to support that additional density. And I think the other thing that's important here is this land is relatively level. It slopes very gently from the west to the east, where a lot of the R9 land that I've dealt with is quite slope affected. So it has some physical attributes to it that support the R6 and the increased density.
I'm looking at the map on page 3, and it looks like R6 is a zoning district to the west. Is it also the zoning district for the area to the northwest of that? So, for example, Ferdwin Avenue, that area up there, is that also R6?
Yes.
Okay. I guess the other thing I want clarification on the questions I asked the staff as well, too, is that we're not dealing with the platting actions this evening, we're dealing with the land use issue, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Hickle.
Why was the 15% included? Was it to do with, to keep people from building large gargantuan shops next to their house, or can you give me some?
Yeah, I would believe so. As we originally proposed straight zoning with no special limitations. And quite frankly, if you look at 15% of an acre and a quarter, even dealing with the net area of the smallest lot, 40,000 square feet, we could build a 6,000 square foot footprint. And I can't imagine a 30% lot coverage. It would be crazy. But it will conform to, what is typically happening now in the building industry. The size homes are typically 2-story and encompass a smaller area. And detached shops are popular in this area. But again, I think the total of 6,000 square foot of coverage will be sufficient for good use and to maintain quality of this property.
Are there any other questions? So I have a question, Mr. Sawhill. Is there any private area? I'm wondering about a possible condition for a homeowners association.
The Michaels are intending to have covenants on the property. The property to the west does have covenants, but they don't necessarily have a homeowners association. It deals with the development standards. Currently, what the neighborhood to the west does now, Snowflake, is they have an informal association. They patch the hat. They collect for snow removal and get it done. But they currently don't have a homeowners association.
But these roads are these roads private? Did I hear that?
No, they're public roads, but they're not in a
road.
road service district, not in a formal one.
So how are they maintained?
The neighbors get together and collect money and maintain them.
And how are the covenants going to be enforced then if there is no homeowners association?
The covenants are enforced by the individual owners.
Okay.
In the last 20 years, it hasn't turned to be an issue for this neighborhood.
Uh-huh. All right. Are there any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. You have 6 minutes and 38 seconds left.
Thank you. I hope not to use any of it.
We are now the open hearing to the public testimony. Groups have 5 minutes. Individuals have 3 minutes. Is there anyone here who wishes to testify? Anyone at all? Okay, seeing and hearing none. The public hearing, I'm sorry. Mr. Sawhill, would you come back? Do you have any other comments that you want to make?
I have no additional comments. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, though.
Okay, are there any other questions? Seeing and hearing none, the public hearing is now closed. The matter now rests with the Commission. Mr. Phelps, do you have a motion to approve?
Yes, I do. In the case of, what is the case? Case number 2012-014, which would involve a rezoning from R9 to R6 with special limitations. I move for the approval of that zone change subject to the conditions that are identified on page 13 of the staff packet.
That motion has been seconded by Commissioner Hickle. Are there any, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yes, Madam Chairman. This rezoning makes sense. The area to the west and northwest of this property is now zoned R6, and so the type of land use that would develop in this area would be similar to that to the west. Moreover, we've heard testimony from the petitioner that the area in question here is more typical for an R6 area than an R9 area. The soils apparently are suitable, the area is flat, and that type of characteristic or attributes are more characteristic of an R6 area. Further, this particular proposal is consistent with the 2020 plan and with the recently approved Hillside District Plan. It's also consistent with the 1982 land use plan map. For these reasons, I would support the proposed rezoning.
Mr. Hickel, do you have any other findings of fact or comment that you would like to make?
Only that I don't have a problem with the lack of a homeowners association. The Hillside's been running that way for all of my life anyway. And anyway, I don't see any particular reason to add those costs to the project.
Are there any other comments? Well, I have a comment to make. It has been my experience that covenants, codes, and restrictions are not enforced if there is not a homeowners association. And I believe that the cost of the formation of a homeowners association is nominal in relationship to the overall value of the increased number of units or lots that can be obtained. So unless someone wants to entertain a motion for the creation of a homeowners association as an additional condition, number 3, I will not be supporting this motion because I believe that all subdivisions should have a homeowners association, particularly when there is the issue of road maintenance and snow plowing involved.
Madam Chairman, can I change my motion? Is that procedurally possible? I would change my motion to include...
Just 1 minute. An amendment to the motion.
Okay. I wish to create an amendment to my motion. Okay. And I wish to amend the original motion by the addition of another requirement or stipulation that requires the homeowners association, the formation of a homeowners association for the subject property.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion? It's seconded by Commissioner Wilson. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the motion? Okay. Is there an objection?
I think we do have to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, the creation of a homeowners association is probably an appropriate vehicle for ensuring maintenance, particularly of the roads of this area, and for that reason I'd be supporting that amendment to my original motion.
All right. Thank you. Is there an objection? What? Mr. Wilson.
I don't live on the hillside in a similar situation, so I'm a little new at how this works, or what is the cost what are the consequences if you don't have a homeowners association?
Mr. Pruse.
Well, I happen to live on the hillside with the homeowners association, and I'll tell you it's a very expensive homeowners association. It's over $1,000 a year to be a member. And I will tell you that the building codes during construction were not followed. The association really hasn't. The only thing they do is write letters and assess fines that they never collect because there's no dollars for the association to hire an attorney to force the builder or lot owner into some sort of resolution. So it just the unfortunate consequence, I guess, on it would be that the boundary neighbor of the person that's not in compliance with the covenants ends up losing even and still paying. It's happened on multiple occasions. There's been many complaints, and I will say it's Providence Point. And it takes up most of the board's time, but this association is now 10 years old, and for 10 years the same people have had the same problem. So, I have mixed emotions about this amendment. Based on my experience, I tend not to support it.
Would you, going back 10 years, knowing what you know now, would you purchase in that subdivision?
I think the key to it is to police yourself and police things as they're happening, and don't let them be, if you understand the rules and the covenants, that you don't understand, that you understand what is expected, and you see something going awry next door to you, or if you buy something, that you should understand what's next door to you, as far as not meeting those covenants. And so the answer to the question is, I was one of the first ones in, and I didn't particularly pay attention to the neighbors. There are 5 houses on my cul-de-sac, and 2 of them are out of compliance, and they have been for 8 years. So, the answer to your questions is probably not.
Commissioner Mulcahy.
Yeah, I will not be voting in favor of the amendment. I think the reasons Commissioner Hickel and Commissioner Pruz have already articulated. I've lived in areas where we had them, and I've lived with areas we haven't, and I think as Commissioner Pruz said, the only difference was I had to pay dues in the one. By not supporting this amendment, not including this amendment, doesn't preclude that if those homeowners at some point in time do want to get organized and form when they can, but I don't think it's necessary for this commission to require one. Thank you.
I'd just like to make a comment here. I know how the vote's going to go, obviously, and this is probably not really worth saying, but it is a very standard practice to have a homeowners association. It's done throughout the state, done all the time. And does it work perfectly? No, it does not. But it is the mechanism that we do use to provide maintenance in areas such as this when we don't have a service district. So, a comment.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Well, I was wondering if you could go into your side of it a little further for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Well, I've probably created over a dozen homeowners associations since I've been in business as a land developer, and I believe that they are a necessary evil. And the value of the homeowners association rests solely as the responsibility of the developer. And I'm sorry, Mr. Pruz, that you've had a bad experience. That's not the case with other developments. I think we can all look to the Southport development and say that that homeowners association functions very well as far as enforcing the covenants, codes, and restrictions for that subdivision, for which Mr. Sawhill, if I recall correctly, was involved with. And I think particularly where, there is a road maintenance issue, that it is important that a community, whether it's 8 lots or 80 lots, come together and everybody has the opportunity for the same information in regards to the services that are going to be provided. There is no enforcement of the covenants, codes, and restrictions or architectural control for a subdivision once it leaves the hands of the developer if there is not a homeowners association. The municipality will not enforce those matters unless there is a serious complaint, at which point in time it goes to the bottom of the list. I am a firm believer that every new subdivision needs to have a homeowners association because the municipality is not capable with having the resources to enforce covenants, codes, and restrictions. So, I guess we need to vote on the amendment. Please use your machines. That is a tie. And so therefore it fails. Thank you. Takes us back to our main motion. It was with Mr. Phelps and Mr. Hickle. So we have a motion to approve. We'll use our machines. We don't have to. Is there any objection to the motion? No. All right. It is approved. Thank you. In the matter of case 2012-014, the rezone is approved. Have a few other matters to take care of. Are there any appearance requests? There was none, I don't believe. You have to sign up for an appearance request, don't you?
It has to be in writing, yes.
The appearance request has to be in writing.
At the end of the meeting, don't you get 3 minutes without a request? Don't you call for any other comments from the public?
Just a moment. We have commissioners' comments, but we're checking appearance requests, Mr. Leva. Okay. For the benefit of those that are here, I would like to read 21.10.501 appearance requests. An appearance request must state the purpose and topic of the appearance and include any related narrative and graphics. If the graphics are of a size that cannot be readily produced, 10 copies shall be submitted with the appearance request. Appearance requests are limited to 5 minutes and are limited to subjects not related to a pending agenda item. No matter brought before the Commission as an appearance request shall be decided at that time if a public hearing would ordinarily be required. The matter may be rescheduled for a public hearing at the request of the person making the appearance after proper notice to the public. Okay.
Can I ask a procedural question here? He's been sitting in the audience for a long time.
I know.
Is there any flexibility? I don't know if there is or not, but I thought I should ask.
Yeah, we'll. You're in for what? What? Could you speak to the issue? Madam Secretary.
Based on my previous experience with other boards and commissions, as well as the previous position I had before this one, we've always required that they've always been required to be submitted in writing so that they can be put on the next available agenda, and that's the process that they follow. And any commission meetings that I've been at, UDC for one, and PZC for another. Appearance requests, unless submitted in advance, are declined. You're more than happy to contact staff in the morning and talk to them, but let me see here. Hold on just a second.
Can we take a vote to whether or not to make an exception? I mean, I assume we can make an exception.
Mr. Barrett?
No authority for that.
Huh?
There's no authority to have grant an exception. You're operating under Robert's rules.
Mr. Barrett, do you have a comment?
Madam Chair, it's a code requirement that someone submit, but I'm just wondering that your 6 collective minds would work better at this than me. You know how when someone at a public hearing is speaking and runs out of time, you're able to get more out of him by asking a question.
Here's a possible way out.
Okay.
Can I ask him a question? Can a commissioner? We have the authority to ask you a question.
Me a
right?
question?
Can I ask a question of him through you?
Raise your hand if you'd like to hear Mr. Oliva.
I think we have to.
2. There are 2.
3.
3.
Yeah.
No.
4. All right. Okay, so here's the deal. Mr. Oliva, you may come forward. And I understand that.
I'd feel better if I could try to do the procedural aspect, which is, through the chair, can I ask the gentleman to make a short presentation of not more than 3 minutes as to what concerns him?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Ron Oliva, and I have appeared before this commission, waited to the end of the session, and got my 3 minutes. I'm here today on 2 issues: Carlick Manor, the recent deaths. I think there's a spirit and intent of a violation. And the violation of Mr. Court's death on January 1st was that appropriate responses would be taken by non-medical staff. Here in the application, it clearly states that residents experiencing unusual medical or other distress require increased monitoring by the staff. I don't think that occurred. From the reports in the Washington Post, the Daily News, and by Melinda Freeman's own words, that she said this individual was extremely fragile, was not only a chronic alcoholic, but needed additional medical attention. I don't believe this occurred, and it reflects on how the Brother Francis shelter got started with Francis Trader. A kick in the foot rousted him, and then the officer left, came back, checked on him again, and he froze to death. This is the similar situation that I believe happened at Carlick Manor with an underfunded, undertrained staff. And there's a big, I feel, ethical, moral question that this wasn't the last act of mercy, but a potential mercy killing. And I feel that this is a slippery slope to euthanasia. And so I think it should be reviewed, and someone should be held accountable, because no one's being held accountable. This is just going to be, well, he was going to die anyway. Is this a hospice facility? Is this housing last or housing first? Melinda Freeman, who's with a 6-figure salary, is saying this is safe and secure. And these people have medical, mental, physical, and addiction issues that cannot be addressed by putting them back in their room, on their bed, a chronic inebriate, on heavy medication, and the pill bottle's empty. And you come back and check, and he's dead. I think we have a stronger moral conscience and moral responsibility to hold someone accountable for that death, and it's not Mr. Court. And this commission granted that conditional use with no accountability clause. I'd like that basically reviewed. The second thing is, next month will be a year of the 7-year violations of lack of conformance of the Brother Francis shelter. They have done nothing in 11 months.
Thank
What's
you.
going to happen next month?
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
I don't have anyone in the queue. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. We'll see you next month. You'll get a written request. Thank you, Mr. Phelps.
Okay, I do have a report from the chair regarding the Title 21 rewrite. You heard the comments that I made earlier at the beginning of the meeting. I also wish to inform you that the mayor and the Department of Planning have released $15,000 to allow a contractual obligation with Sally Kuskos to assist us in our deliberations and in our minutes of the Title 21 rewrite. Assuming she has accepted the contract, it needs to be signed off by the city manager and legal, but we hope to have her on board next Monday for our work session. And one of the things that I have asked her to do is to speak privately with each one of you on an individual basis to see what your major concerns are regarding the Title 21 rewrite. So that will be occurring beginning next week, and she will be contacting you on an individual basis. So our schedule is, as you can see, is quite full with the Title 21 rewrite. I have asked the Department of Planning to postpone any of the other long-range planning issues like the wetlands until we're finished with the Title 21. We do have to, because of time constraints, deal with the Anchorage School District budget approval. But other than that, our long-range planning activities will be devoted solely to the Title 21 rewrite, and it would be my personal goal that we would be finished with the Title 21 rewrite chapter by chapter by no later than the middle to the end of May. And that we will be reviewing these chapters on a chapter by chapter basis and then dealing with the amendments on a per chapter basis and any other amendments that the Commission feels that is appropriate for us to pass on to the Assembly. Does anyone have any questions about what we're going to be doing? Commissioner Phelps.
Just a question about when the administration initially went to us, they wanted to be sure that we reviewed the recommendations of staff / the mayor. We're still doing that, aren't we?
Yes, we still are. But the 106 amendments encompasses all of the chapters, and it would be very difficult as far as having a public hearing is concerned to limit the comments to just those. Okay? All right. Anything else regarding all of that? I would entertain a motion. What? Oh, under comments, we do need all right. So for the purposes of disclosure, we need, Commissioner Pruz needs to disclose for the record he has listened to the audio and reviewed the materials and was prepared, past tense, to participate in the UMed and an APU master plan. Thank you, Commissioner Pruz. Now, may I have a motion for adjournment? What about you? For?
Did you have both of them, or just?
I have both. I reviewed them.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Commissioner Hickle.
Commissioner Hickle is on record by reviewing the audio tapes of the issue with UMed.
Okay. Is there?
And do I have to list the case number? Or is that
She can.
one?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay, gentlemen. Is there anything else? I would entertain a motion for dismissal. Commissioner Pruse, may I have a second? Commissioner Hickle, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.